Bank heists have long captivated our imaginations with their daring schemes and high-stakes drama. But have you ever wondered which robberies stand out as the most daring and successful? From meticulously planned tunnel escapes to high-profile bank takeovers, these heists push the limits of criminal ingenuity. In this exploration, we'll delve into the most greatest bank robberies in history, where the amount of money stolen is staggering. Banco Rio robbery, Buenos Aires, $20 million. One of the most daring and bizarre heists in modern history took place in Buenos Aires, where a group of thieves pulled off a nearly cinematic plan to rob Banco Rio in 2006. The robbers, disguised as customers and armed to the teeth, entered at the bank and took dozens of hostages, making a big scene to fool the authorities. But unlike ordinary robbers, these individuals had a sophisticated plan. While they kept the police busy negotiating the release of the hostages, they had dug an underground tunnel that led them from the security room to a hidden exit. The whole negotiation was a ruse to buy time. In the end, the thieves left without a trace, taking about $20 million in cash and jewelry. What made this robbery even more interesting was the fact that the thieves left a written message for the police at the bank. In cash, no love. It was a perfect blow to the authorities who were spectacularly deceived. Although some members of the gang were later arrested, most of the money was never found, making this one of the most famous robberies in Latin America. Boston Bank robbery, $30 million. In one of the largest bank robberies in the United States, a group organized by notorious criminal Anthony "Fats" Pino entered a Boston bank branch on January 17, 1950. In a detailed plan, they did what would be known as the biggest bank robbery up to that time. The planning was nearly perfect. The gang entered the bank when it was closed and neutralized the security guards without using weapons, making off with nearly $7 million in cash and checks. About $30 million in today's value. It was an act that required great courage and skill, and for a long time, the police were without any clear leads. The robbers thought they had pulled off the perfect heist, but a simple mistake proved fatal. One of the gang members, Joseph Specs O'Keefe, was arrested for another crime and began speaking out to save himself. This led the police to discover the identities of other robbers, and most of them ended up in prison. Meanwhile, most of the stolen money was never found. Their story inspired movies and books, and while it was a brilliant plan, it was defeated by human frailty. The betrayal of a friend. The Brinksmat robbery, $39 million. In the winter of 1983, a group of thieves made British crime history when they carried out the infamous Brinksmat robbery at Heathrow Airport. The group had planned to rob only cash, but when they got to the safety deposit boxes, they were surprised to find $39 million worth of gold bars and diamonds. What started as an ordinary robbery turned into one of the biggest scandals in British criminal history. The stolen gold bars were melted down and distributed on black markets around the world, making them difficult to find. But the robbery came at a high cost to the criminals. Most of them were betrayed by their accomplices, and some ended up in prison or were killed during clashes with the authorities. This robbery forever changed the world of crime in Britain, and its value still resonates in history as one of the biggest heists ever carried out. Great Train robbery, Britain, $50 million. One of the most famous and dramatized robberies in history, the Great Train robbery of 1963, was not a bank robbery in the classic sense, but it is worth mentioning because of its audacity. This group of 15 people, made up of some of Britain's most notorious criminals, stopped a train carrying money from British banks to London. After using a false signal to stop the train in an isolated location, the robbers boarded the train and made off with almost £6 million in cash. About $15 million in today's value. More than just money was being stolen. This was a challenge to a system that seemed unbreakable. However, their success quickly faded. Almost all the members of the gang were arrested, including the famous leader, Bruce Reynolds. Most of the money was never found, but Ronnie Biggs, one of them, managed to escape and lived in Brazil for decades. making the story of the train robbery a myth in the criminal world. The British Bank of the Middle East, bank robbery, Beirut, $50 to $100 million. Among the most famous robberies ever to take place in a war zone is that of the Bank of the British Bank of the Middle East in Beirut. In the midst of the Lebanese civil war, chaos was in every corner of the country. But while most people were fighting for survival, a group of robbers had an extraordinary plan. Taking advantage of the chaos, they infiltrated the bank by digging a tunnel that led them directly to the vault. When the bank's doors opened the next morning, staff couldn't believe what they were seeing. Gold, money, and valuable jewelry were gone. No break-ins or signs of violence were visible, but the value of the money taken was astronomical, between $50 and $100 million. The robbery was a perfect coup, carried out with a calmness and sophistication that left everyone speechless. At the heart of this crime lay a challenge to order and stability. At a time when the citizens of Beirut were dealing with daily violence and insecurity, this robbery shattered trust even more. Many of the bank's customers never saw their possessions again. And although some robbers were caught, most of the treasure was never found. Banco Central robbery in Fortaleza, Brazil, 70 million. When we talk about robberies that require months of precise planning and organization, the Banco Central robbery in Fortaleza is the perfect example. The gang stayed behind the scenes for months, taking over a house near the bank and starting to dig a 78-meter tunnel to the vault. This tunnel was no simple opening in the ground. It was equipped with ventilation and lighting, looking like a real engineering construction project. Until the last day, no one suspected their movements. They had managed to infiltrate the bank's treasury without making a noise, making off with $70 million. The value of this robbery did not lie only in the large amount, but in the skill with which it was carried out. There was a certain tragic irony that, while the world continued to think of classic armed robberies, these thieves were underground. But as often happens, inattention and arrogance betrayed them. Many of the gang members were arrested after a long and complicated investigation involving security agents from Britain and other countries. The money was partially recovered, while some of the robbers are still at large, making this one of the most sensational 21st century. These were the biggest cases of bank heists, where criminals made off with staggering sums of money. But at the end of the day, most of them ended up behind bars, just like the thieves who stole a mere $1,000. Crime may seem thrilling, but it almost always leads to the same fate. If you found this video is helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more history videos.